make it adhere to the surface. So if you plug in this right here, ray points or primitives, and then here the collision primitive, which is our geometry, and then you can set the ray direction. The ray direction is going to control kind of like the way that it's going to adhere to the surface. All right. And it just depends how you want it to adhere based on how the camera is facing. So you can see that this part right here looks much nicer than the other part. And then here's where our UVs are actually taking place. So you see if I move my UVs, then they actually affect the way our raise up is working. So that's why I had my UV set to a 1 on the Y. And then if just to further explain that, we come here and we visualize our UVs, our normals. You can see that I'm controlling my normals here. So the direction in which they face and the X, Y, and Z, we're controlling it here, and that affects the way the raise up computes them. Take a couple steps back because I had it set to like a specific place I wanted it to be. Okay, so we're back, and I think my camera was sort of positioned on some place right here. There's some places that this kind of technique was worked better. As you can see, like these spots here look much nicer. Uh, so I usually kind of move that and set it up so that it's working perfectly on the parts that you want the camera to look at. And the cool thing is that it's just really fast to compute this kind of setup because we've already animated it. So now we have a ray working, and not only is the ray working, but it also has UVs already applied to it. Then we go up here, everything that we've been working on and set up is already working here as well. So as you can see, you have tons and tons of really nice control over the way this is moving over the surface. Now we want to surface this. So what I'm doing here is I'm grabbing my geometry and turning it into points. Then I am applying a red to them, and then I am applying a delete based on the bounding box. So I'm using a bounding box of a sphere, just so that we can delete everything that we ain't gonna use, just so that we're just deleting the parts that the camera is seeing, just optimizing the scene a little bit, and then we're applying a black color to the raise up, which is actually, it's not really doing much just because the attributes of the color have already been applied up here, the CD. So you could just erase them, erase the color attributes before plugging in there. Then I am transferring the color attributes using an attribute transfer of my UVs and my color, and then controlling them based on this threshold here, which controls how much they're being transferred, and you can even like blend them. But I'm not blending them because I want my edges to be sharp, right? Okay, and then there's multiple ways of doing this. You can either group, or I am using a filter expression of color, so deleting the red and leaving just the black points. So if we hit play, then you get that. Which is basically all we need to generate a surface based on our particles. So I'm using VDV from particles at a pretty high resolution, then smoothing it. And then using a VDB combine. What I'm using on the VDB combine is I'm using a low res version of our initial logo, combining it with my liquid, and then converting it back to a polygon. And this is basically doing the same thing that a boolean does. It's deleting all the liquid part of it, that it's penetrating the geometry. So this way I'm not getting that intersection. So let me just zoom in and you guys can see it clearer. Obviously, like that, this right here is taking a little bit to compute those VDVs because it's quite a high value. So see how it's basically clipping the bottom. So the part that would continue to go down, so if this line here is our geometry, then on red we have our liquid. It would penetrate, it would come underneath. So the green is what we're deleting, which is the part of the liquid that penetrates the geometry, and then we're turning that into a polygon, converting those VDVs into polygon. And there you have it. Really cool. Really cool stuff. And then I'm using one more boolean here. And the reason why I'm using this boolean is so that I can get this really sharp edge crop right here. And that was because the client asked that they didn't want the liquid to go over the O just yet. They wanted to keep the O clean. So if I show you here, it's essentially just traveling on top of the O perfectly. And it's being clipped utilizing this box right here. So this box is basically what controls what's being clipped on the top, and then this one's controlling just to make sure that it's like perfectly circular. And then we turn it back into a VDB, and then we convert it again, and then we are initializing our vector over UVs, because of course this is not gonna have UVs. It's gone through so many VDBs. All the UVs are gone. So we want to transfer them back onto our geometry based on the UVs that we've already created prior, which is what we covered earlier when we were chatting on our tutorial. So let's give it a second for it to load again after it's been processed. So you see that it's a very controllable way of setting liquids. You can use booleans or clips or whatever way you want to use to delete things. I would recommend procedurally, and then run it back through BDB, and then it's going to avoid your liquid from moving through parts of the geometry you don't want it to cover. Okay. So this attribute Bob is using the UV coordinates and then mapping our color value, which is a UV grid, so that we can visualize it here. So this is what the UVs are looking like on the points, onto the points. And then you can see that we're transferring those UVs that we had on the points like onto our geometry. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna reduce the resolution of our liquid. Just set this to a high value so that we're not having to wait through on this so much. Just get rid of the smoothing. I'm gonna bypass this entire part, and I'm also gonna bypass all of that. So we've already talked to about what this is doing. I'm just gonna skip it. The liquid is not gonna look as nice, but at least we'll be able to chat easier. So VDB from particles, and we want to convert them. Particle size we need to increase. that into our initializing of the UVs. So that should work much faster. Okay. And then we have the attribute transferred onto it, which are the UVs. So you can see that the UVs are moving with, you can see the color, like it's moving with the geometry. And it's not like slipping and not all over the place. Right, so you can see when we visualize this here, let's use a UV quick shade just to see. Yeah, we can't use a UV quick shade, that's why I'm using this VOP right here to use our UV coordinates to visualize the grid and plugging that into our color, just so that we can see that our UV is a point attribute and is not a vertex attribute. It's being applied onto our points, and then from our points copied onto our geometry, and then finally just making the color equal to 1 so that we're not actually just seeing the color equal to the UVs. Just getting rid of the color equal to the UVs, and then when you apply that here, then you can apply the texture. Doesn't matter, it doesn't really matter if we have this color map set to the UV grid. This can be basically anything. What's important is that the UVs are moving with the liquid. And then you can see here that I've got my grid right here. As a UV project, so if you stretch this out, this is going to stretch out the UVs. So if we bring this here, we can visualize how the UVs are being mapped. See what's happening? So like basically you can use bacon or our UV grids or whatever you want to use. You know, this in your case this would be the you know, whatever texture you're doing, you want to kind of test it here to make sure that the way it's looking properly. And of course, like this looks distorted just because it doesn't have enough points for Houdini to properly show us what this image is. If we increase the points on the resample, you'll be able to see it clearer. But the thought is just we're just making sure that the UVs are properly working. Um, so after array, let's use an attribute delete here just to get rid of our CD. Or just get rid of it here, visualize fall off. So here we can see I'm just showing you guys how it works, like visualizing the UVs from what we've set up here. So if we grab the UVs from up here, this right here, and I were to transform it, you'll see that it's actually updating it here as well. And it is going to properly stick, which is what we want. We want it to stick and stretch. See how that's working? Works perfectly. So after that happens, then we have those UVs plugged in here and transferred as point attributes. So that's why after we'll visualize it here, it's transferred as point attributes. And then our conditions controls how much we're blending it and how it's being copied. And the reason why it looks like a little bit jaggy, you see if we reduce this drastically, it's because this is being transferred based on the points. So if we reduce it to like a very low value there, something like that, you can see that this is being transferred based on the points that we have here. So if we were to grab this and increase the amount of points, then the fidelity is gonna be much cleaner. So if we were to grab this and increase the amount of points, then you'll see that as soon as we use this attribute transfer and visualize what our points are doing, then yeah, it's gonna be so much cleaner. And then you can see that the UVs properly move and stretch the way we want them to do. Okay, so the fidelity of the transferring of the VDVs is controlled based on the attributes transfer, condition, distance, threshold, and blend. So as soon as we transfer this really nice UVs and we visualize this with proper UV maps here, voila, you get like this really nice piece. And of course it's low res because our geometry is low res, and I reduced it for the sake of just being able to just move it like that. All right. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and this has been another RMA Fire tutorial.